I didn't recognize my twin brother the first time I saw him again. Not because he had changed, but because the man standing in front of me looked like someone who had slowly disappeared while still breathing. His eyes were hollow, like windows in an abandoned house. His shoulders were thin, hunched in a way that made him seem smaller than I remembered. And the first words he whispered to me after 4 years were not, "Hello," not "I missed you." He simply said, "You shouldn't have come." But by then, it was already too late. My name is Daniel, and my twin brother's name is Michael. Growing up, people used to joke that we were two halves of the same person. Same face, same voice, same crooked smile that showed up when we tried not to laugh. But our lives went in different directions. Michael stayed in our hometown. I left. He built a family. A small house on the edge of town. A quiet life. A son he adored more than anything in the world. I chased work across cities and states, always promising I'd visit more often. And every time I did come back, Michael greeted me the same way, with that warm, effortless smile that made everything feel like it hadn't changed, even when it had. The first red flag was subtle. 3 years ago, our phone calls became shorter. Michael had never been the quiet type. He used to talk endlessly about his garden, his fishing trips, the ridiculous stories his son Ethan would bring home from school. But suddenly his answers became brief. "Yeah, everything's good. Just busy. Work's been tiring." At first I believed him. Life gets busy. People grow distant. That's normal. But something about his voice didn't sit right with me. It sounded careful, like someone speaking while standing near a sleeping dog they didn't want to wake. Then the calls stopped completely. No birthday messages. No holiday greetings. Nothing. At first I assumed he had lost his phone. Or maybe Ethan had taken over the house and Michael was just overwhelmed. But months passed. I called dozens of times, straight to voicemail. I even sent letters to the house. None were answered. That's when the uneasiness began to settle into something heavier, something colder. I finally drove back to town on a gray October afternoon, the kind of day where the sky looks like it forgot how to be blue. Michael's house looked the same from the outside. Same wooden porch. Same old truck parked in the driveway. But something about the place felt wrong. Too quiet. No music playing through the windows like he used to. No smell of coffee drifting out the door. Just silence. I knocked. The door opened a minute later. Ethan stood there. But the boy I remembered, the shy teenager who used to trail behind his father like a shadow, was gone. The man in front of me had the same eyes, but they were harder now. Colder. "Uncle Daniel," he said, sounding surprised, but not happy. Just surprised. "Is your dad home?" I asked. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. Just a moment. But it was enough. "Dad moved away," he said. The answer came too quickly. "Moved?" I asked. "Where?" Ethan shrugged. "Somewhere up north." He wanted a fresh start. The words felt rehearsed, like lines memorized for a play. Inside the house, everything looked strangely untouched. Michael's favorite chair still sat in the living room. His fishing hat still hung on the hook by the door. Even his boots were still by the hallway wall. If someone moves away, they take those things. I noticed Ethan watching me as I looked around. Not nervously, but carefully, like he was measuring how much I was noticing. "Dad left most of his stuff," Ethan explained quickly. "Said he didn't want reminders." The explanation sounded reasonable, but it didn't feel true. Michael loved that house. He built the porch himself, painted the kitchen twice because he couldn't decide on the right shade of blue. A man like that doesn't just leave everything behind. That night I stayed in the guest room. Ethan said it would be easier than finding a hotel. He was polite, helpful, but distant. We talked about small things during dinner, weather, work, the town. Every time I mentioned Michael, Ethan changed the subject. Not abruptly, just gently steering the conversation away. Around midnight, I couldn't sleep. Old houses have a way of amplifying silence. Every creak in the floor sounded like a question waiting to be answered. I got up to get a glass of water. That's when I noticed something outside the kitchen window, a small wooden shed near the edge of the property. I had seen it 100 times growing up. Michael used it to store tools. But tonight, there was a light inside, a faint yellow glow leaking through the cracks in the wood. I frowned. Michael never left lights on in the shed. He used to joke that electricity bills were his personal enemy. I stepped outside. The cold air hit my face immediately. The yard felt different at night, bigger, quieter. With every step toward the shed, that uneasy feeling in my chest grew heavier. Halfway across the yard, I stopped. Because I heard something, a sound so faint I almost convinced myself it was the wind. But then it came again, a soft scraping noise, like someone shifting their weight against wood. My heart started beating faster. "Hello?" I called quietly. No answer. The light inside the shed flickered slightly. I walked closer, closer, until I was standing right in front of the door. And then I heard it, a voice, weak, hoarse, barely more than a whisper. But the moment I heard it, every muscle in my body froze, because that voice sounded exactly like mine. Slowly, my hand reached for the door handle. Behind me, the house was silent. But just as my fingers touched the rusted metal latch, I heard the back door of the house open, and Ethan's voice cut through the darkness. Cold, sharp, and suddenly no longer polite. "Uncle Daniel," he paused, then said quietly, "You weren't supposed to find that." The moment Ethan said those words, my hand froze on the shed's rusted handle. The night suddenly felt colder. I turned slowly, my heart pounding in a slow, heavy rhythm that seemed too loud for the silence around us. Ethan stood a few yards away near the back porch. The yellow light from the kitchen window stretched across the grass and stopped just short of his feet, leaving most of his face in shadow. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. But the voice inside the shed spoke again. Weak, hoarse. "Daniel?" My breath caught in my throat. There was no mistaking it now. That voice was Michael's, my twin brother. Alive, locked inside a wooden shed on his own property. For 4 years. I looked back at Ethan. "Open the door," I said quietly. He didn't move. Instead, he let out a long breath and rubbed his face like someone who had been carrying a secret for too long. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. "That's the second time someone's told me that tonight," I replied. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. "Open the door, Ethan." For a moment, I thought he might refuse, but then his shoulders dropped, and slowly, he nodded. The door creaked as I pulled it open. The smell inside hit me first. Stale wood. Dust. Cold air that hadn't moved properly in years. A single hanging bulb cast weak light over the small room, and in the far corner, someone was sitting on a chair. Thin, wrapped in an old blanket. His beard had grown long and uneven, streaked with gray. His hair was messy, falling over hollow eyes that squinted against the light. But the moment he looked up at me, it felt like looking into a mirror that had aged 10 years overnight. "Michael, my twin brother." For a second, neither of us moved. Then he laughed. A quiet, broken laugh that sounded like something cracking inside his chest. "Well," he whispered, "either I finally lost my mind, or you actually came." I walked forward slowly. Every step felt unreal. "Michael," I said. His eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years. Relief. "You shouldn't have come," he repeated softly. Behind me, Ethan stayed near the doorway. He wasn't running. He wasn't panicking. He just stood there watching, and that calmness made the whole situation feel even more disturbing. 4 years, Michael said quietly. "That's how long I've been in here." The words hit me like cold water. 4 years, while I was calling, writing letters, driving across states thinking my brother had simply disappeared. I turned toward Ethan. "Why?" The question came out sharper than I intended. Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe and looked at the ground. "You wouldn't understand," he said finally. "Try me." Michael shifted slightly in his chair. The movement looked painful, like his muscles weren't used to moving freely anymore. "Wasn't just him," Michael said quietly. I looked at him. "What do you mean?" Michael's eyes drifted toward Ethan, then back to me. "It started with money," he said. "A lot of it. 3 years ago, Michael had made an investment. Something small at first, but it grew. Faster than anyone expected. Within months, the quiet little house and garden life had turned into something much bigger. More responsibility, more pressure, more people involved. And Ethan thought I was going to ruin everything," Michael said. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "You were going to sell the land," Ethan said. Michael sighed. It was just a discussion. It was going to destroy everything Mom built, Ethan replied. The tension between them felt older than the shed, like this argument had been replaying in silence for years. I never planned to leave you, Michael said. But you locked me here anyway. Ethan's eyes flickered. For the first time since I'd arrived, guilt appeared on his face. It was supposed to be temporary, Ethan said quietly. I just needed time to figure things out. Michael gave a tired smile. 4 years is a long time to figure things out. The silence that followed felt heavy. I looked at Ethan again. You told everyone he moved away. Ethan nodded slowly. No one questioned it, he said. You barely visited. The neighbors mind their business. The truth in those words stung more than I expected. Maybe if I had visited more, maybe if I had come sooner. Michael suddenly leaned forward slightly. Daniel, he said. There was urgency in his voice now. You and I still look the same. I frowned. What are you talking about? His eyes locked onto mine, and for the first time since I opened the shed door, something like determination appeared in them. You can walk into that house tomorrow, he said quietly. You can live my life for a little while. My stomach tightened. Michael! He shook his head. Listen to me. His voice grew firmer despite its weakness. If Ethan believes I'm still under his control, he'll keep making the same mistakes. I stared at him. You want us to switch places? Michael nodded slowly. Just for a while. Behind us, Ethan shifted slightly. Switch places? He asked carefully. Michael looked toward him. You wanted control, he said. Well, now you'll have to deal with someone who knows exactly what's going on. Ethan studied both of us carefully. His eyes moved from my face to Michael's, then back again. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking. Finally, he gave a small shrug. You two always looked identical anyway. The casualness of his voice made my chest tighten, like this entire situation had somehow become normal to him. But Michael leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes briefly. For the first time since I arrived, he looked hopeful. Later that night, after helping Michael into the house and giving him food, for the first time in what looked like years, he pulled me aside in the hallway. His voice was barely above a whisper. Daniel, be careful. I frowned. You're the one who's been locked in a shed for 4 years. He shook his head slow. That's not what I mean. His tired eyes looked toward Ethan's closed bedroom door, then back at me, and he said something that made a chill crawl slowly down my spine. Ethan didn't keep me alive for 4 years by accident. He paused, then whispered, he was waiting for something